Disclaimer: this content is intended for a mature audience only. Viewer discretion is advised. The room was still, holding its breath the way twilight does before the stars begin to appear. I remember how his gaze found me, not suddenly, not boldly, but with the quiet persistence of someone tracing a secret across the air. His eyes did not ask permission, nor did they invade. They lingered, soft yet unyielding, as though he was memorizing me before he had ever touched me. And in that moment, something inside me shifted, an awareness, fragile and intoxicating, that I was seen in a way I had not been in a long time. We were not strangers, not entirely. There had always been laughter between us, the kind that hides beneath ordinary conversations, waiting for the right silence to bloom. But that night, there was something different. The world beyond the walls faded, as though time itself wanted to step aside and grant us this fragile, flickering intimacy. His presence carried weight, and yet it was gentle, like a tide brushing against the shore, threatening to pull me in without force, only invitation. I wanted to look away, to pretend I had not noticed. But honesty betrayed me. My breath caught, my hands trembled against the fabric of my dress, and I knew he saw all of it. There was no mask strong enough, no performance steady enough to hide the truth that I was vulnerable in his presence. And strangely, I did not feel ashamed. Vulnerability felt almost like freedom, though it terrified me to admit it. Every word between us that night seemed to linger longer than it should. His questions carried weight, and my answers trembled with truths I hadn't planned to reveal. There was no rush, no urgency. Just the quiet unfolding of two people, standing at the edge of something neither fully understood but both feared to step away from. Perhaps it was desire, or perhaps it was something more dangerous, recognition. The kind that whispers you have found someone who sees you, not just as you are, but as you might become in their presence. The kind that makes you wonder if the ground beneath your feet is steady enough to carry the weight of what could happen next. And then, he leaned closer, not with hands, not with touch, but with silence so charged it felt like the air itself had become fragile glass. I knew something was about to break. Would you like me to continue the story toward romance filled with slow-burning intensity, or tilt it more toward emotional conflict and inner resistance? He didn't move closer, not yet, but the silence between us became louder than any spoken word. My heart beat against my chest like it wanted to be noticed, and I wondered if he could hear it. There was something unsettling in the way his gaze lingered, not lustful, not careless, but as though he was unwrapping layers of me I had carefully kept hidden. It frightened me, and yet I stayed. I thought of how we had come to this point. Months of conversations that seemed ordinary to anyone else, but carried weight for me. His laughter was never casual, it stayed long after, echoing in the back of my mind when I least expected it. He remembered details I had almost forgotten about myself, small things, like the way I curled my fingers when I was nervous, or how I tilted my head when I listened. Those memories weren't grand gestures, but they built something stronger, the quiet conviction that I mattered to him. I hadn't felt that in years. Too often I'd been surrounded by people who looked but never really saw, who spoke but never truly listened. With him, I felt as if my presence alone was enough. And that was a dangerous gift, because when someone sees you so clearly, they also hold the power to undo you. He leaned back slightly then, as if to give me space, but his eyes never left mine. It was restraint, I realized, an act of care, not hesitation. And strangely, that only made the space between us more charged, like an unfinished sentence hanging in the air. I wanted him to close the distance, yet part of me feared what would happen if he did. "You're quiet tonight," he said softly, his voice carrying a warmth that disarmed me. I wanted to answer, to say something light, something that would disguise the storm inside me. But the truth slipped out instead. "I don't know what to do with the way you're looking at me." For a moment, he didn't respond. He only breathed in slowly, as though steadying himself, before letting his lips curve into the faintest of smiles, gentle, unhurried, dangerous in its patience. And I knew then that nothing between us would ever return to what it had been before. something irreversible had begun. Would you like the next part to heighten the emotional pull with near confession moments, or deepen the tension by pulling them apart with unspoken fears? His smile lingered in my mind long after it had faded from his lips. It wasn't the smile of a man playing a game, it was quieter, steadier, like someone who knew the weight of silence and chose not to fill it too quickly. That restraint both comforted and unsettled me. I wanted him closer, and yet, something inside me hesitated, an old bruise, invisible to everyone else, but aching now under the light of his gaze. Memories surfaced, uninvited. A relationship that had taught me how quickly affection could turn into absence, how easily promises could dissolve into echoes. I had learned to guard myself, to keep my vulnerability folded away where no one could touch it. But here he was, not asking for it, not demanding it, just waiting, with a patience that threatened to undo every defense I had built. He leaned against the arm of the chair, his voice quiet but certain. "You think too much when you should just let yourself feel." The words struck something deep in me. He didn't know the history I carried, the shadows that had taught me to measure every glance, every gesture, before allowing it to mean anything. And yet, it felt as though he did. There was a pause, and then he said, almost as if speaking to himself, "I've wanted to say things to you I'm not sure I should." His confession hovered, unfinished, drawing my breath into my throat. My heart stumbled, torn between wanting him to go on and fearing what truths might follow. I wondered what story had shaped him, what losses, what longings. He carried his own kind of stillness, but it wasn't emptiness, it was the kind of quiet forged in people who had survived disappointments and chosen not to let them harden. That depth drew me in more than words ever could. And beneath all of it lay the question neither of us had spoken aloud: were we standing at the beginning of something real, or simply at the edge of another undoing? The air was heavy with possibility, with risk, with desire pressed so carefully it felt sacred. His eyes lingered on me again, unflinching, and I realized the conflict wasn't about him, it was about whether I was ready to be seen this completely. Would you like me to shift next toward a near confession moment between them, or introduce an outside interruption that complicates the fragile intimacy? The air between us felt thinner now, as if the room itself were holding its breath. His eyes stayed on mine, unwavering, and it was unbearable and beautiful all at once. I wanted to speak, to break the silence before it consumed me, but the truth pressed too heavily on my chest. My pulse betrayed me, quickening, leaving me caught between wanting to step forward and fearing the fall that might follow. "I don't know if I can," I began, but my voice broke, softer than I intended. His brow furrowed, not in frustration, but in quiet concern, and that nearly unraveled me. Because how do you protect yourself when the very thing you fear is also the very thing you want? He didn't interrupt. He didn't rush me. That patience of his was more dangerous than any bold advance, it left me with nowhere to hide. His silence told me he would wait as long as it took, and yet that very waiting burned like a confession in itself. I thought of every wall I had built, every time I had sworn not to let myself be drawn in so deeply again. And yet, here I was, standing on the edge of surrender, not because he demanded it, but because something inside me ached to trust him. The conflict twisted within me, the need for safety battling the pull of something far more fragile, far more real. Finally, he shifted, not closer, but in a way that made the moment impossibly heavier. His voice was low, almost breaking against the quiet. "I see you, even when you think you're hiding." The words landed with the force of truth, stripping me bare in ways no touch ever could. My throat tightened, my hands curled against my lap. I wanted to deny it, to laugh it away, but I couldn't. He had seen through the cracks, and instead of turning away, he stayed. That was the most terrifying intimacy of all. I met his gaze again, and for a heartbeat, the world seemed to blur at the edges. The tension between us coiled tighter, no longer something we could ignore. I didn't move, and neither did he, but it felt as though one more breath, one more word, might be enough to change everything forever. Would you like me to take the next part into a moment of near confession, or hold the suspense by letting an outside interruption break the intensity? The silence cracked first, not by my words, but by his sudden confession, raw and unguarded. "I wasn't supposed to feel this way about you," he said quietly, as if admitting something forbidden. My breath caught, every nerve in me alive with the weight of his honesty. The steadiness in his voice trembled just enough to betray the risk he had taken in speaking it aloud. For a moment, I froze. His words didn't just ignite the air between us, they complicated everything. Because deep down, I had sensed it too. The lingering stares, the unfinished sentences, the pauses that lasted too long to be accidental. We had danced around it, careful not to give it shape, as though naming it would make it real. And now, he had broken the seal. "You weren't supposed to," I whispered back, almost as if repeating his words would lessen the ache they stirred in me. But instead, they made it sharper. I could see the history in his eyes, the restraint of someone who had held back for too long, who had drawn lines in the sand only to watch them blur under the weight of something stronger than intention. He leaned forward slightly, his voice heavy with struggle. "I told myself you deserved more than complication. That I should protect you, even if that meant keeping my distance." His jaw tightened, but then softened. "But I can't keep pretending." The truth in his voice hit me harder than I expected. Because wasn't I guilty of the same? I had hidden behind my past, convinced it shielded me, when in truth it only starved me of the closeness I craved. Yet, hearing him confess what I hadn't dared to say aloud unraveled something inside me. The conflict deepened, desire pulling me toward him, fear tugging me back into myself. It was not just about wanting him, it was about daring to believe that something lasting could be born from this fragile tension. I opened my mouth, ready to answer, but the sound of a phone vibrating on the table shattered the moment. A call, unexpected, its name glowing faintly against the dim light. His eyes flickered to it, then back to me, and in that heartbeat I knew, whatever, or whoever, waited on the other end would change everything if he answered. "Would you like me to let him take the call, forcing an outside complication, or have him silence it, heightening the tension of the moment?" The phone buzzed again, its vibration humming like a warning between us. He didn't look at it this time. Instead, his eyes held mine, steady and unyielding, as though the choice had already been made. With a quiet exhale, he reached out and silenced it, his hand lingering a moment longer on the screen before retreating. The room returned to its fragile stillness, but something had shifted, an invisible line had been crossed. "That call," I began, my voice cautious, unsure if I wanted to know. He shook his head softly. "It doesn't matter. Not compared to this. Not compared to you." The certainty in his tone disarmed me. For so long, I had braced myself for disappointment, for someone to turn away when things became complicated. Yet here he was, choosing to stay, even as the world tugged at him from the outside. The weight of that choice pressed against my chest until my own walls gave way. I was afraid, I confessed, my voice trembling. Afraid that if I let you in, you'd see the parts of me that aren't perfect. The scars. The doubts. The mess. My eyes burned, though no tears fell. "But you already see them, don't you?" His gaze softened, and for the first time, he reached across the small distance between us, not rushing, not claiming, but offering. His fingers brushed against mine, tentative yet sure, like someone asking a question without words. "I see all of it," he whispered. "And I'm still here." It was not a grand declaration, not a sweeping gesture. It was something quieter, more dangerous, and infinitely more real, a promise not to turn away. And in that moment, I felt the ache of every guarded silence, every withheld truth, dissolve into something like relief. But the twist came not from him, but from me, from the realization I had tried to bury. This wasn't just about him seeing me. It was about me daring to see myself, fully, without shame. To believe that I could be loved not in spite of my vulnerability, but because of it. The room seemed to breathe with us then, alive with the quiet climax of unspoken words finally finding form. And as his hand closed gently over mine, I understood, the risk was real, the stakes were high, but so was the possibility of something lasting. The silence that followed wasn't heavy anymore. It was soft, like a blanket settling around us, familiar and safe. His hand remained over mine, steady, warm, unpretentious. The room no longer felt like a stage for tension or restraint. It had become a quiet sanctuary where truths had finally been spoken. We didn't rush to fill the air with promises. There were no declarations of forever, no sweeping vows. What we had was smaller, simpler, and somehow more profound, the understanding that something inside both of us had shifted. We had dared to step past the edge, not into certainty, but into possibility. His eyes searched mine one last time, as though memorizing the way I looked in this moment. "You don't have to hide anymore," he said gently. And it wasn't just about me, it was about him too. About both of us choosing to stop pretending, to stop guarding so fiercely against the very thing we longed for. I thought of the past, of the broken promises that had once left me cautious, and realized they no longer had the same hold over me. I wasn't untouched by them, but I wasn't defined by them either. What mattered now was the choice before me, the choice to let myself be seen and to see him in return. The phone on the table stayed silent, its glow gone, forgotten. The world outside would return soon enough with its noise, its demands, its complications. But here, for now, there was only us, suspended in a rare kind of honesty. I drew a breath, slow and steady, before whispering, "I think I'm ready to stop running." His hand tightened around mine, not with urgency, but with quiet reassurance, as if to say he'd walk beside me at whatever pace I needed. We sat there in the stillness, two people not yet finished, not yet certain, but finally unafraid to begin. And as the night wrapped itself around us, I knew the truth of it. Intimacy isn't in the grand gestures or the flawless words, it's in being willing to be seen, completely, and still choosing to stay. Sometimes love begins not with a kiss, but with the courage to be seen.